Well, Lisa, we really appreciate you taking some time to meet with us here today. And if you can help us understand when it comes to menopause and we men who are just turned 60, maybe in a relationship with somebody who's about my age, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, what are the most important and simplest things a man can know about menopause, what to expect physically from their partner and emotionally, and how can we just really be a source of support in that time?
Yeah, it's such a great question and so important, right? I feel like in the menopause space, we're getting better at having conversations with women, but as we do, we're realizing that we're leaving out all of the people who surround us in this conversation. And although I am the main person having this experience, it impacts my partner, my children, my colleagues, and so being able to have really open conversations about what's happening is so important. So I'm going to highlight two things. So one, the window is a lot larger than you think it is. And by that, I mean age. So perimenopause can last up to a decade prior to full menopause. So menopause is one day. It's the one day you realize that you haven't had a cycle for 12 months. Everything before that is perimenopause. Everything after that is post-menopause. Okay. So the average age of menopause is between 48 and 52. And again, averages, every woman is different. So when you back that up, right, if you back up 48 by 10 years, in your late 30s, it is entirely possible that you are beginning to experience perimenopausal symptoms. So it's really important for partners to know that this is a big window. It can span a long period of time. I've been collecting some men's voice through a survey to see what their experiences are. And one of the main questions they ask is, when will it be over? And the truth is, it's never like some of the intensity shifts and changes, but your partner is changing. We're never going to be that same person again. And the best analogy is that this is a mirror of puberty. So everyone has been through puberty, right? So if you put yourself back in that space and you think about how your body felt at that point, right? How uncomfortable it seemed, how exhausted you were, how you just, it was like all of the operating rules that your system had have completely changed, and you have to figure out how this body works again. The same level of shift and change as puberty is happening at perimenopause, but it's in the opposite direction. So in puberty, our estrogen, testosterone for us as well, is increasing, right? To working towards that first menstruation and having a monthly cycle. Now we're on the other side of it, where estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are decreasing, and we're working towards that final period and no longer being in that fertile stage. So it is that level of exhaustion. It is that level of, like, again, trying to figure out a new operations manager or manual for this body and what's happening to it. That same sort of level of confusion of trying to figure out not only how the body works, but who I am now in this new stage. So if you can, that's sort of the most empathetic place you can come from, is putting yourself back in that experience of what that was like and imagining what it's like now. And the other layer of complication I sort of talk about in that is that when we're teenagers, one, people know more about puberty. Two, we talk about it more and we have sort of a level of expectation, right? Like, my kids are at their late teen years, early 20s, and we're starting to come through that time where they slept for days at a time. But we have that expectation of, like, that's what's going to happen because that's what their brains and bodies need. The same level of care is required at this end, but we don't talk about it. We don't have the language to do so. And it's a real sort of missed opportunity to be able to really get back into the body in ways that we haven't been for a long time. And the other piece of it is that now I am the minister of infrastructure for my family, right? And everyone around me. So I don't have that opportunity to sleep for days, which I need. And so that's how we see it playing out in, struggles in relationships.
And I know as a man, when that's happening, and the minister of infrastructure is a beautiful way of saying it. As a partner within a relationship, still, even though I know all those things are true, I know a lot of changes are happening, there's still this sort of sense of what am I not getting right here? What am I missing? How am I missing the mark? How can I be more supportive here? When sometimes, if you're talking about the puberty analysis and what's the changes that are happening as a parent with 3 daughters who went through all of that, and I've gone through that myself. You don't know what's going. Well, how do I respond? How do I fix this? Which we men tend to want to do all the time. How do I fix this whole situation so everything's good again? What would you say to men who are sort of approaching that, letting some self blame among the volatility of life within a relationship?
Yeah. So, one, absolutely, it is true. And every woman's experience is completely different. So, it's really hard to say this is exactly what your partner is going to experience. So, yeah, absolutely. There is some level of what is actually happening in our lives right now. And neither you nor your partner, in many cases, know or understand what's happening. And when you said most men want to approach this from a position of trying to fix, that is where I offer a shift in perspective, because the thing that the majority, now again, I'm going to speak in generalizations.
Sure.
There might be some people who that's absolutely what they want, right? Like they might want to hand this to their partner and say, here, fix it.
Yeah.
Possibly. And the majority of humans who I work with and support with, what we really want is someone just to listen. And some of the sentence stems in response that I will give to men where this feels really uncomfortable is just, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I wish, where can I go to find out more? So asking some questions, but mostly just offering statements of support. So, because what we need more than anything is to feel seen and heard. Because as we are going through this transition in our bodies, we're also shifting in how we have been seen culturally. One of the things I hear from women at this stage, and I can attest to it as well, is suddenly you just feel invisible, like you don't even exist outside of your home anymore. And so knowing that your partner is there seeing you, there to listen and be as supportive as you want them to be, right? So putting yourself in the position, it feels very vulnerable, right? To say those things out loud, to say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's how you were feeling. I'm really glad you shared that with me. And then at a time when everybody is calm, where there isn't a lot of conflict, where there is no conflict, actually, that's the best place to be able to say, okay, so I'm noticing what would feel good for you for me to support you. Maybe it's I take on the grocery shopping. Maybe it's I take on some of the driving. Maybe it's I make a meal once a week. Again, it's going to be different relationship to relationship, but being able to have that open communication from a place of empathy and curiosity is key.
Now, here's a question. What is something men should stop doing within the context of a relationship with somebody who's perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, that would make the journey easier for their partner? And what I heard you say was definitely listen, understand where they're coming from, what they're feeling, how you can best respond. What's something men could stop doing?
Yeah, it really depends in the relationship. There's all kinds of social media around like just stop breathing so loud or just stop chewing so loud, right? Like there's all of these things. But I think the biggest thing that can happen is stop trying to be the fix and the one who knows everything. Right? Don't try to explain to me what I am experiencing. Just give me space to communicate to you what is happening in a way that feels safe and that I won't feel judged and that you're not going to try to just like know everything about this all of a sudden. Because the honest truth is neither person in the relationship really does. So joining each other in this place of vulnerability, and it might be the first time in a relationship that you've ever really communicated in these ways. So the other thing is just like stop pretending. Stop pretending that everything feels okay. Stop pretending that that everything's fine, and just be real and vulnerable in those moments of like, okay, we are in uncharted territory. And how are we going to navigate this together?
I think what I hear you saying is so critical for men to understand, because we have a tendency, I would think, within a relationship, if something's not right, even, in your 20s, you think it's my fault. I must be doing something wrong. And we sort of take that upon ourselves. And I think what I hear you saying is you're not doing anything wrong for the most part. These are changes that are outside of you, literally outside of you. It really is now, how can you respond in a way that's supportive and sort of take away that burden of, I must have caused this menopause. It must be me. It's not
Yeah,
you.
it's not you.
It's not you. But some men, we have a tendency that the men, people pleaser, want to make everything good and make our wives happy. We're like, I'm failing, so it must be my fault. So you gave some freedom there, and I appreciate it.
Brief interruption to the interview where we draw your attention to the For Her tab on the timmedical.com website. And if you click on that, you can see a variety of products that we have available for ladies, whether it's a lubricant, a moisturizer, different massagers, but check that out. Click on them, see what they have to offer, and see if they might be of interest to you. And always want to remind you that any product that you order from timmedical.com that exceeds $75, the shipping is free. So just scroll down through there, get an idea of what we're offering on the site, and also why we're offering it. But check it out, timmedical.com, click on the For Her tab.
Yeah, and that actually, thank you for that also. It's a good perspective to hear, because I don't think we often think that our partners are internalizing that and going, "Oh, well, this is my fault." Because it often feels, when we do that sort of thing, when we internalize, when we reflect that back out, it feels like blame on the partner, right? So I think thank you. Again, thank you for sharing that, because knowing that both partners are feeling at fault when it's a situation where there is actually no space for blame, right? We're all trying to figure this out together.
I'm writing that down. No space for blame. So what I heard you say early on when you were talking was, menopause, there's that one day, not literally, but there's that day where, like, 1 year from your last period, that's the actual menopause moment. Not to diminish anything, but it's the perimenopause, then the postmenopause. What differences are there? What can you expect in your partner, and what can your partner expect?
Yeah. So in perimenopause, Dr. Mary Claire Haver does a really good job of explaining it as peri-chaos, because what's happening in that time is estrogen, progesterone, testosterone primarily are fluctuating wildly. So if you think about hormones as the great communicators in our bodies, the communication systems that have been working really well for decades suddenly have a wrench thrown in them, and the communication just is not happening the same way. So, for example, it takes a lot more estrogen to push out an egg at this stage. So if you think about, in communication, when we go into a room and we're trying to have a conversation with someone and they don't hear us, we speak a little bit louder. And if they still don't hear us, we speak a little bit louder. So that's what is happening with estrogen, right? And by louder, it means like larger quantities of estrogen are having to be released. So instead of this nice, predictable cycle that has always happened, we're having these big pushes of estrogen. And then we have crashes where there is very little estrogen in the system. The same sort of thing is happening with progesterone and testosterone. And so it's just this really chaotic time in the body, which is why we experience things like hot flushes and night sweats, right? Those are sort of the two hallmarks that most people know about. They also are often the butt of the joke, and it gets on my nerves because it's not a joke. Those are actually messages from your cardiovascular system. Those are vasomotor events. So they are messages from your cardiovascular system say, hey, we don't have the same kind of protection we used to have, because estrogen has protective factors for every system in your body. So all of these symptoms I position as messages coming from your body saying, we aren't functioning the same way, we don't have the same kind of protection, and we need to start doing things differently in order to have good quality long-term lifespan and health span. So those are two, those two symptoms, like I said, are sort of hallmarks, but that's why we also see things like brain fog and word recall issues and changes in vision and itchy ears and vaginal dryness. And those, like itchy ears, vaginal dryness, dry eyes, and changing vision all fit into the same category of drying and thinning tissue, right? So as we lose estrogen and testosterone, all of that tissue starts to become more brittle, less flexible. And so that's why we start to see those changes. And then there's all of the mental health changes that come as well. Anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping. That's a significant one. But then there's also more obscure things that people don't always connect, like changes in digestion, right? That the chaos in the hormones that are happening change our gut microbiome. As estrogen declines, we actually end up with a microbiome that resembles more of a masculine microbiome than it did before. So digestive changes are happening. Food sensitivities may be shifting and changing. Different allergies are happening. So I think there's over 60 documented symptoms of perimenopause, and that profile is going to look different for every woman.
I don't know how you do it.
Me neither.
But I will say this to the men who are watching this
Uh,
channel: 95% of the viewers of our videos at this point, because we're talking about vacuum erection devices and accessories with those, they're men, and 95% of those men are 50 years in age and older. So this is a good message for them. And if I could say anything to the men, it's what I've heard Lisa say so far is it's not your fault. And the best thing you can do is to be sort of the banks of the river that allow her to flow. And you're providing some support, and you're doing so not in a way that says, let me fix this for you. Let me listen to you. I understand there's a lot of volatility in outside of your control. And I just want to be here and love you in the midst of this. Tell me how I can help. I want to listen. I appreciate that. But now let's
yeah.
talk about on the intimacy side, because this does carry over into that. You did talk about dryness and thinning of the walls of the vaginal canal. Can you help me understand that?
Mhm.
How can we support our partners in that time? You've got men a lot of the men have gone through a radical prostatectomy. They're finally starting to restore some erectile function using the vacuum erection device. But now, how do they navigate those waters with their partner who's menopause, postmenopause, perimenopause?
Yeah, it's such an important question because we're all in this place of real vulnerability and lacking confidence. And we don't always communicate that very well, especially because we are talking about, when we talk about intimacy and all of the body parts that are involved in that, we have never been given the language to talk about it
Yeah.
in any way. Right. So even when again, generalizing, but even when we're younger, we don't have these conversations very much.
No.
And so now we're in a space where all of this function is changing, and it can feel, again, in this survey, the information I was collecting, some of the voice that comes out around that is like, I thought she just didn't love me anymore. I thought she wasn't interested. And on the female side, it's the same. It's like, well, I'm not fertile anymore. I'm not seen as being desirable. So there's all of this story that we have marinated in for decades. So what I love about this is that when we work with skilled practitioners, it's actually an opportunity to become closer in our relationships than we ever have been. So to the physicality of it, like I said, as estrogen and testosterone, those two hormones in particular, as they are dropping, testosterone is the libido supporter. So as that declines, so does our natural libido. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that we now have to access it in potentially different ways. That's also part of where the hormone therapy conversation can be helpful. So testosterone and libido with estrogen, all of the interior walls of the vagina are becoming thin, dry. That's why sex is painful now, because there's not that same kind of flexibility. And as those walls and that tissue thins and becomes more brittle, it's also more susceptible to infection. So that's why we see in older women higher levels of UTIs, and they're currently being treated with antibiotics when the actual root cause issue is vaginal estrogen cream and getting estrogen into those tissues to make it healthy and strong again. So we've got these two factors at play, which are really challenging. So testosterone, if we're talking about hormone therapy, a little bit of testosterone cream goes a really long way in supporting both libido and the physical structures. Vaginal estrogen cream is actually really important. The research is becoming really clear that to support long-term health, and not even just sexually, but it's also what makes sure we don't experience organ prolapse, and what is making sure that our muscles stay strong enough to be able to, like, it's core, right? It's the foundation of core.
Yeah.
So keeping those things healthy and strong, one, physically, it's good for us, but it also allows for us to be able to engage in intimacy in better ways. In the industry you're in, you also know like lubrication becomes really important. So those are sort of like the physical aspects of things. And then on the emotional side, it's the conversations around like, this is what's happening. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I actually need now. Right. And what feels good for one person isn't going to feel good for another. So they're really relationship specific conversations that need to happen around what is workable, what's doable, what feels good now. And then, like I said, this is where working with skilled professionals is really important because there's all kinds of knowledge and information that the general population just doesn't have about how to have these conversations. Because when you have the right language and you're able to communicate openly, it can actually enhance intimacy. There's studies that show that women over 50 are having the best sex of their lives, but it means having really good and open conversation with their partners.
And you've talked about many great things, but one of them you mentioned was the professional, bringing a professional in. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a whole variety of folks who can be helpful. Sometimes it is a menopause consultant like myself who can come in and help give this kind of language. I love being able to just give it. It's sometimes as simple as sentence starters of like, just start with this, just start with this. And it can feel uncomfortable because it feels like you're reading from a script. But as you start to internalize that language, it shifts the way you communicate, not only about sex and intimacy, but everything else in your lives as well. So, like shameless self promotion in that sense.
Sure.
But there's also intimacy coaches who I've had quite a few of them on my podcast as well, who have great techniques and strategies that are super supportive of helping couples have these kind of conversations. Yeah. So there's lots of people out there. It's just knowing what works best for you and your partner.
There's for those of our men who are watching right now, our audience, if you're not yet ready to do that, to take a step to bring in a professional, there's a great book that I read years ago called Talk to Me Like I'm Someone You Love, which is really a
Mm,
conversation starter book that just how you phrase the question, how do you approach those conversations does help a lot. And it may lead to then what's next. In the same way, I probably wouldn't recommend to every man who's watching this, you should talk to your partner, tell her, go get some hormone therapy. That'll fix everything. You don't want to take
no,
that approach.
no,
So you're really in that place of receiving and listening and supporting at the same time.
yes,
When an opportunity has been presented to support actively, then you jump on that because you love your
yes,
partner. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So thank you for that. The one question I have about, we've talked about the physical, emotional changes in the partner and how that affects the male in the partnership. Also talked about some of the physical challenges with the sensuality and sexuality. Now let's talk about the deeper level, just as a couple, and sort of wrap things up here. If I'm in a relationship and I want to draw closer to my partner rather than allow some of these changes, whether it was my surgery or my erectile dysfunction or her challenges that she's facing with menopause, what are the things that we can do as partners that bring us closer together, even when it feels like everything's trying to pull us apart?
Yeah. And again, it's so different from couple to couple because everybody has a different way that they enjoy connecting. But one of them is, and I will say, so credit to my partner, to my husband, who throughout our relationship made space for the two of us to just have time together, just the two of us, even when our kids were little, because that's another hurdle to overcome. If you're in a relationship where for a couple of decades, your relationship was transactional because of everything that was happening in your world, right? You're just constantly in logistics and you haven't had any time to be a couple again. One of the things I hear is as kids leave the nest and couples find themselves just the two of them again, it's this feeling of, I don't know who this person is anymore, really, when it's just the two of us. So it can be as simple and as challenging as getting to know each other again.
Yeah.
And so that might mean starting with some dates, right? Make intentional time to go to a movie, go out for dinner, go for a walk, right? When we're moving our bodies, there's, science that talks about how when we move our bodies, it actually makes it easier to have challenging conversations. So go for a walk, have a conversation. These small things that over time add up to improved emotional intimacy. Right? Yeah.
I think one of the things that you said, it reminded me of another conversation I had with a doctor who said we've got to shift in the sensuality side of things, but I think this is a broader one from performance. We've got to shift from performance to pleasure. And I think
Yes.
in relationships, when you have young children, you're just getting started, careers are getting started, it's performance, it's transactional in a way. But you reach this place in life, sensually, as well as just real life, where it's not so much about performing as it is about now let's really enjoy the pleasure of being together. And it may look entirely different than it did when we were 25.
Yes.
When we're 65, it may look different. I'm not trying to make it, light of it, but it really is something you say, well, what is my paradigm? What is the shift that I need to sort of rally around and then move forward with my partner?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point because we often think like, well, how do we get back to what it was before we had kids? And that's not a helpful question because we are not the same people that we were then. Our bodies are not the same. We've been through life together and we're in this different place. So the question really is, what do we want this to look like and feel like now? Because it will never be what it was. And maybe what it was before wasn't that great anyway. And so now we have an opportunity to make it like you said, actually pleasurable and enjoy that time together rather than it feeling like another task we have to check off the list.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Lisa, if I could ask one more question of you, you've been to enough teachings and such where the speaker will say, if you just remember one thing about this, my time has been worth it. But what is the one just overwhelming piece of advice you would give to men and women who are at about my age at 60, you're in a relationship, you're in a partnership with a woman who's, going through perimenopause, menopause. What's the biggest piece of advice you would give to them?
Yeah, it's communicate. Right. We find ourselves often in these silos of isolation, right? I am going through perimenopause. This is happening to me. I feel very isolated and alone in it. I don't have the language for how to communicate about it. And that isolation ripples out. Where if we are able to communicate and say, had a couple on my podcast, and Brian, the male and the partner, said, "This is our problem. This isn't a you problem or a me, it's us together." And I thought that was such a beautiful way of framing that of this is and in my own partnership, we have always referred to each other as a team. So we are working through this together as a team. So having that communication and knowing this is not one against the other, this is the two of you working together.
Thank you. Perfect. That's perfect. Well, Lisa Boat, I want to thank you for joining us in this conversation. I know we could talk another hour and get deeper into things, but I want to respect your time and our audience's time. But if people want to find you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, the two easiest ways are my website, so liberatedmenopause.ca, or on Instagram, I am at lboat, and that's how you can find me.
Okay, so we'll put that in the description for this video. But I want to thank you. So honored to have you here and really helping us to understand some things that present challenges within relationships. And we feel just a little bit more supported and encouraged and ready to move forward in the right direction. So thank you.
Well, thank you for making space for this really important conversation. I appreciate it.